I am not a soldier. I have never held a weapon. My hands were made for turning pages, cataloging texts, preserving the voices of dead civilizations so the living might learn from their silence. I am Keth Sovan, 4th-rank cultural archivist of the Dominion of Tessera, and I am the last surviving member of Occupation Detail 14. There were 931 of us assigned to the human city. I am telling you this from a medical bay on Tesseri Prime, where they are growing back the 3 fingers I lost and treating the psychological fractures that the medics say may never fully heal. The Intelligence Bureau wants my testimony sealed. The Military Council wants it destroyed. The Galaxy Council wants to pretend none of it happened. I am choosing to speak anyway. Because in 41 days on a human world, I learned something that every species in this galaxy needs to hear. And I learned it in the worst possible way. The humans did not defeat us with warships. They did not defeat us with superweapons. They did not marshal some grand army to push us from their soil. They simply refused to stop. And one by one, we broke. The occupation of Haldwell, that was the name of their city, a mid-sized settlement on the human colony world of Avery's Landing, was supposed to be administrative, a formality. The Tesseran combined fleet had swept through the system in 6 hours. The orbital defenses, such as they were, had been reduced to spinning debris. The colonial militia had surrendered after a brief, savage engagement that cost us 12 soldiers and cost them over 200. I remember Commander Vorath's briefing on the troop carrier as we descended through atmosphere. He stood at the holographic display with his 4 arms folded behind his back and his crest raised in the posture of absolute confidence. The humans on this world are colonists, he said. Farmers, laborers, families. Their military garrison has been neutralized. Our mission is to secure the settlement, catalog any items of strategic or cultural value, and establish administrative control pending formal annexation. This is not a combat deployment. This is a custodial operation. He looked directly at me. Archivist Sovan, you will be responsible for processing their cultural materials. Books, data storage, art, religious items. The Council wants a complete inventory. We need to understand what these creatures value if we are going to govern them effectively. I acknowledged the order. I remember feeling something close to excitement. I had studied human culture from intercepted transmissions for 3 years. Their literature, their music, their visual art, it was unlike anything else in the known galaxy. Raw and contradictory, and full of a desperate beauty I couldn't fully explain. I was about to touch the real thing. The shuttle broke through the cloud layer, and I got my first look at Haldwell through the viewport, a lattice of streets and low buildings spread across a river valley, surrounded by farmland and bounded by dense forest on 3 sides. Smoke rose from a few structures near the center, damage from the militia engagement. But most of the city looked intact. It looked quiet. It looked harmless. We landed in what appeared to be a public park, our shuttles scorching the grass black. I stepped out into air that tasted of soil and something sweet I later learned was called honeysuckle, and I thought, this will be a gentle assignment. A few weeks cataloging artifacts, and then reassignment to the next world. That was my first mistake. My second was not listening to Specialist Renn. Renn was a signals intelligence analyst, young for her rank, with the pale crest and narrow build of a Highland Tesseran. She had been monitoring human communications during the fleet's approach, and on our second night in Haldwell, she found me in the building we'd converted into an archive processing center. A human structure they called a library, which turned out to be a building filled entirely with physical books. I was overwhelmed. Thousands of them, tens of thousands. Printed on pressed plant fiber, bound in adhesive and cloth, organized by subject and author. The humans still used physical text storage alongside their digital systems. Something about the tactile experience, they said, the smell, the weight in the hands. I found it extraordinary. Renn did not care about books. Archivist, she said, standing in the doorway. I need to show you something. She led me to her workstation in the communications building 2 blocks away. The screens were filled with waveform analyses and frequency maps. I've been monitoring the local communication bands since we landed, she said. Standard procedure. Civilian transmissions, emergency frequencies, everything. And? Listen. She played a recording. I heard nothing. Literally nothing, just the soft hiss of carrier static. "I don't understand," I said. "That's the point." She pulled up a comparison display. "This is what a human settlement's communication spectrum should look like." The screen filled with dense layers of signals, personal devices, data networks, broadcast media, emergency services, commercial traffic, thousands of overlapping transmissions, the electromagnetic noise of a living city. "And this," she said, switching to a second display, "is what Haldwell looks like right now. Almost nothing. A few faint signals on low-power bands that could have been automated systems, but the spectrum was essentially dead." "They've gone silent," Renn said. "Not just quiet, silent. Every personal device, every network node, every broadcast system shut down within hours of our landing, simultaneously. That requires coordination." "They're frightened," I offered. "Civilians reacting to invasion. They've turned off their devices to avoid detection." Renn's crest flattened the Tesserine equivalent of a human shaking their head. "Archivist, you don't understand. Humans don't do this. I studied their behavioral patterns during the Pellery contact and the Brevin trade disputes. When humans are frightened, they communicate more. They flood channels. They panic call their families. They post on their social networks. They argue and organize and scream. That's what they do." She leaned closer to me. "When humans go silent, it means they've agreed on something." I thanked her for the observation and told her to report it to Commander Vorath. I went back to my books. She did report it. Vorath noted it in his log. Nothing else happened. 6 days later, Renn was one of the first to disappear. I need to describe what Haldwell felt like in those first days, because the feeling was the first weapon they used against us. The city was not empty. The humans were there. We could see them. They walked their streets, tended their gardens, fed their children. They queued outside their food distribution centers with the patience of people accustomed to hardship. When our patrols passed, they stepped aside. They made no eye contact. They did not spit, did not shout, did not throw objects. They simply stopped. Whatever they were doing, walking, talking, working, they stopped, turned their faces slightly away, and waited until we passed. Then they resumed as though we were a weather event, a brief rain, an inconvenient wind. It should have been ideal, a compliant population, an orderly occupation. Commander Vorath sent reports to Fleet Command praising the smooth transition and recommending Haldwell as a model for future colonial administration. But the soldiers felt it. I noticed it first in Corporal Dravan, who led the patrol responsible for the Western Residential District. He came to the library on the 4th day, ostensibly to ask if I needed escort to any of the outlying structures. But he lingered. "They watch us," he said. "They're civilians observing an occupying force. It's expected." "No." He shifted his weight, his lower arms clenching and unclenching. "It's not like watching. I've been in 7 occupations. Civilians watch with fear, with anger, with curiosity, sometimes with hope if they think you're liberating them. You can read it." He paused. "These humans watch like they're counting." "Counting what?" He looked at me for a long time. "I don't know. That's what frightens me." I made a note of the conversation in my personal log. It seemed like the kind of psychological observation the Cultural Bureau would find interesting. I didn't understand yet. What the humans were doing, what I later learned they were doing, was exactly what Dravan intuited. They were counting our patrols, counting our personnel, counting our supply rotations, learning our schedules, our habits, our routes, mapping our entire operational footprint through nothing more than silent, patient observation. No technology, no intercepted communications, no espionage in any form we were trained to detect. Just eyes. Thousands of quiet, careful, unblinking eyes. On the 7th day, 3 soldiers from Patrol Unit 6 did not return from their evening route through the industrial sector. Commander Vorath dispatched a search team. They found the patrol's route clear. No signs of struggle, no blood, no weapons discharge residue. No evidence of any kind of confrontation. The soldiers' tracking implants had gone offline simultaneously, at 1947 local time, in the middle of a street flanked by warehouses. Vorath ordered the nearest 100 humans detained and questioned. They were cooperative. They answered every question. They had seen nothing, heard nothing. They had been indoors, as we had ordered all civilians to be after the 1900 curfew. They were telling the truth. We had instruments that could detect physiological deception markers in most known species, and the humans we questioned showed none. I later learned this was because they genuinely had not seen the abduction. The humans who carried it out were a different group entirely. The ones we questioned had simply been told nothing, so they could reveal nothing. Compartmentalization. The humans had a word for it. They had been doing it to each other and to their enemies for thousands of years. 3 more soldiers disappeared on the 9th day, 2 on the 11th. No bodies, no evidence, no explanation. The city remained calm. The humans continued their routines. They stepped aside for our patrols. They looked away. They waited. I should tell you about the girl. Her name was Maren. She appeared to be in an early stage of human adolescence, perhaps 12 or 13 years by their calendar, though I was still learning to judge human ages accurately. She had dark hair that fell past her shoulders, and a thin face with a quality the humans call serious, by which they mean an expression of habitual thoughtfulness uncommon in the young. She came to the library on the 8th day. I was alone. The military had assigned me 2 guards initially, but as the disappearances began, Commander Vorath pulled them for patrol reinforcement. An archivist working in a building full of paper, hardly a priority target. I heard the door open and turned to find her standing just inside the entrance, watching me with the steady, evaluating gaze I was beginning to recognize as distinctly human. "Those are my books," she said. I should have contacted security. Standing orders required all civilian contacts to be reported, and all unauthorized individuals in occupied structures to be detained. "All of them?" I asked instead. She almost smiled. "Not all. The ones on the 3rd shelf. The section you're working on right now. Those are mine. I mean, they were mine. Before." I looked at the shelf. Children's literature, filed under something the humans called young adult fiction. Stories about adolescents navigating impossible worlds. I was cataloging them for the archive, I said. "I know. I've been watching from outside." She stepped closer, but not too close, maintaining distance, cautious but not afraid. "You're careful with them. You turn the pages from the edges, not the centers. That's how you're supposed to do it. You're observant." My mother's a librarian. Was a librarian. This was her building. Where is she now? Maren's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes shifted, like a door closing very quietly. "I don't know," she said. This was the moment. The moment when I should have reported her, should have called for a patrol, had her taken to the processing center, entered her into the system. She was a minor without guardianship. Standard occupation protocol required her transferred to a supervised facility. I had seen the supervised facilities, converted warehouses with cots on concrete floors, ration bars distributed twice daily, guards who were increasingly frightened and therefore increasingly harsh. "The book on the end," I said. "The one with the blue cover. What is it about?" Her eyes widened slightly. Then she told me, and the next day she came back, and the day after that. It was reckless. It was a violation of at least 4 regulations. It was the beginning of the only thing I did right. By the 14th day, 23 of our soldiers had vanished. Commander Vorath convened a full command staff meeting in the administrative building we'd seized their City Hall, the humans called it, a word that seemed insufficient for the columned stone structure with its carved friezes depicting scenes of human history. I attended as a cultural advisor, a role I had not asked for and did not want, but Vorath had begun to realize that understanding the humans might matter more than he'd initially assumed. 23 gone, he said. No bodies recovered, no demands received, no communication of any kind from any human resistance group. Fleet intelligence has intercepted no coordinated transmissions. There is no detectable organizational structure behind these disappearances. He paused, and I saw something I had never seen in Vorath's bearing: uncertainty. "Theories," Lieutenant Kasich, who commanded the Eastern Sector patrols, spoke first. "Underground tunnels. The city's infrastructure includes a storm drainage system extensive enough to move personnel through much of the urban area undetected. They're pulling our people down." "We've swept the drainage system twice," said Lieutenant Maren, the intelligence officer. "Motion sensors, thermal imaging, acoustic monitors, nothing." "Then they're using something we're not detecting." "Or," Maren said carefully, "they're not using the tunnels at all. They could be moving through the buildings. The structures here share walls. Many of them have internal passages between units. A person who knew the layout who grew up here could travel blocks without ever stepping outside." The room absorbed that. Vorath turned to me. "Archivist, you've been studying their culture, their history. Does this pattern match anything?" I had in fact been reading about exactly this. The library was full of history texts, and human history is soaked in war. They have been fighting each other with extraordinary creativity for their entire existence as a species. What was happening to us had happened before. "There are extensive parallels," I said. "The humans have a long tradition of asymmetric resistance against occupying forces. They call it many things: insurgency, guerrilla warfare, resistance. The specific pattern we're seeing, disappearance of personnel without direct engagement, psychological pressure through uncertainty, compartmentalized civilian cooperation, matches several historical precedents. Their species has refined these techniques over centuries of practice." "Practice," Vorath repeated. "Against each other."
Every major human power has both conducted occupations and faced resistance movements. They understand both sides of this equation. They know what occupiers need, and they know exactly how to deny it. What do they want? Historically, they want us to do exactly what we're doing right now.
They want us to be afraid. They want us to look at every civilian and wonder. They want us to stop trusting our own judgment. They want the occupation to consume itself from the inside. Vorath's crest rippled agitation, controlled but visible. "And does that work?" I hesitated. Then I told him the truth. "In their history, it almost always works eventually. The only question is how long it takes and how much it costs." The room was very quiet. "Then we accelerate the timeline," Vorath said. "We find whoever is organizing this, and we eliminate them before the cost becomes unsustainable." He ordered a systematic search of every structure within the city limits. Patrol sizes were doubled. The curfew was moved from 1900 to 1600. Any human found outside during curfew hours would be detained indefinitely. All human gathering points, markets, worship buildings, recreation areas were closed. These orders were carried out within 48 hours. The disappearances did not stop. They accelerated. I need you to understand what this did to us. It is one thing to face an enemy in battle. Tesseran soldiers are trained for that. They understand the mechanics of combat: advance, engage, withdraw, adapt. There is a clarity to it. You can see your enemy. You know where the danger is. You can make decisions based on observable reality. This was different. The enemy was everywhere and nowhere. The enemy was the grandmother carrying a basket of vegetables to her home before curfew. The enemy was the man repairing his roof in the morning light. The enemy was the child kicking a ball against a wall. Or they weren't. That was the point. We couldn't know. We could never know. And so we began to see enemies in every face. I watched it happen to our soldiers in real time. Dravan, the corporal who had told me the humans were counting, he stopped sleeping. I'd see him at the checkpoint near the library at all hours, scanning the empty streets with bloodshot eyes, his weapon charged and raised at the slightest sound. When a human woman approached his checkpoint to request medical access for her sick child, he nearly fired. His hands were shaking so badly that his squad had to talk him down. 2 soldiers in Sector 3 fired on each other during a nighttime patrol. A noise in an alleyway, probably an animal. Maybe the wind triggered a cascade of panicked shots. One died, the other lost the use of his left arm. And still the disappearances continued. 31 by day 18, 40 by day 20. We never found a single body. That was the part that unmade us. Not the loss itself, but the absence of answers. A body gives you information. A body tells you, here is what happened, here is the weapon, here is the method. A body lets you adapt. The absence of bodies told us nothing except that the humans were meticulous. Maren still came to the library. She came every day, slipping in through a back entrance that she clearly knew well. She would sit cross-legged on the floor beside the shelves where I worked and read, or watch me work, or talk. She talked about her books, about school, which was no longer running,
About her father, who she said was away, a word whose careful neutrality I noted but did not press. About the city, what it had been like before we came, the festivals and the river markets, and the way the light hit the valley in autumn. She never talked about the occupation, never asked about our operations, never expressed anger or fear or hatred. She talked to me as though I were a person, and in that quiet building full of human words, I began to feel like one. "Why do you keep coming here?" I asked on the 15th day. "It's dangerous for you." She considered this with the gravity that seemed to characterize everything she did. "Because you're the only one who asks me questions like you actually want to know the answer. The other Tesserans don't. The soldiers ask questions like they're looking for a reason to hurt someone. You ask questions like you're trying to understand something. That's different." I looked at this human child, this young organism from a species that was methodically dismantling my people's sanity, and I felt something I am not equipped to name, something between admiration and sorrow. "Maren, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." "Okay. Do you know what's happening to our soldiers?" She met my eyes. "Humans do this. They look directly at you when they want you to believe them. Other species find it aggressive. I had learned to find it clarifying. "No," she said, "I really don't." And I believed her, not because my instruments told me she was honest, but because I had spent enough time with her to recognize the particular quality of her truthfulness, the way she would pause before answering, giving the question its full weight, refusing to speak carelessly. She didn't know. But I was beginning to suspect that her not knowing was itself part of the design. On the 21st day, Specialist Renn reappeared. Not physically. She was still gone, along with 46 other Tesserans by that count. But her last intelligence report, the one about the communication silence, had contained an appendix I hadn't read initially, a footnote about an anomaly she'd flagged as low priority, possibly cultural. I found it while searching her files for anything that might help the investigation. The military intelligence team had already gone through her data, of course, but they were looking for tactical information. I was looking for something else, something cultural. The anomaly was this. While the electromagnetic spectrum was dead, the acoustic environment was not. Renn had recorded background audio throughout the city as part of her standard environmental survey, and she'd noted that certain sounds occurred at consistent intervals. A bell tower in the eastern quarter chiming at irregular but repeating intervals. A particular melody whistled by a man on Greenvale Street every morning. Children singing games in the park nearest the river, with lyrics that changed slightly each day. Renn had flagged it as cultural behavior, humans maintaining normalcy through ritual repetition. But I had been reading their history books. I had read about occupied France, about resistance networks in Warsaw and Manila and Kabul and a dozen other cities on their homeworld, where people had lived under the authority of forces they refused to accept. And one of the things I'd read about was how they communicated when they couldn't use technology. They sang. They used songs, nursery rhymes, church bells, street cries. They embedded information in the rhythms of daily life, in patterns so organic and natural that an occupier would never think to analyze them. A bell chiming 3 times, then twice, then 4 times wasn't a timekeeping malfunction. It was a number, a coordinate, a signal. I went to the park nearest the river. Curfew was still hours away, and a group of human children were playing in the grass. Several adults sat on benches nearby, watching them with the particular attentive stillness of parents in a war zone. The children were singing. I recorded them. I took the recording back to the library and compared the lyrics to the version Renn had recorded on our 3rd day. They were different. The melody was the same, but the words had shifted. New names, new places, new numbers woven into the counting rhymes. I sat there in the growing dark of the library, surrounded by the accumulated words of an alien species, and I understood. The entire city was a communication network. Every bell, every song, every chalk mark on a wall, every arrangement of objects in a window, all of it was language. The humans hadn't gone electronically silent because they were afraid. They'd gone silent because they didn't need electronics. They had fallen back on something older, something we had no framework to intercept, no technology to decode, because it wasn't technology. It was culture. Thousands of years of shared references, shared songs, shared symbols,
a vast, invisible infrastructure of meaning that existed in the space between human minds, transmitted through glances and melodies, and the position of a flower pot on a windowsill. We were occupying a city that was talking all around us, all the time, and we couldn't hear a word of it. I should have taken this to Commander Vorath immediately. I need to be honest about why I didn't. It wasn't cowardice, though there was certainly fear involved. It wasn't negligence. I understood the tactical significance of what I'd found. The reason I hesitated was Maren. If I revealed that the humans were communicating through cultural channels, through songs and bells and children's games, the military response would be predictable. Vorath would shut it all down. No more singing, no more bells, no more children playing in parks. Every expression of human culture would become a suspected communication vector, and the occupation would clamp down on the only things these people had left. And the children who were singing in the park, carrying messages they might not even fully understand, woven into games their parents had taught them. What would happen to them when the occupation realized they were part of the network? I knew what would happen. I had seen occupied populations in the archive records. I knew what frightened soldiers did when they decided the children were threats. So I hesitated. One day, then two. On the 23rd day, while I was still wrestling with my silence, the humans escalated. It started at 200 local time. I was asleep in the library. I had moved my quarters there, officially for efficiency, truthfully because it was the only place in Haldwell where I felt something other than dread. The building had a quality the humans would call peaceful. Surrounded by their words, I could almost forget what was happening outside. The sound woke me. I lay on my cot in the dark and listened, trying to identify it. Whispering. It seemed to come from everywhere, from the walls, from the floor, from the air itself. A susurrus of human voices, thousands of them, just below the threshold of comprehension. Words I could almost understand. Sentences that almost resolved into meaning before dissolving into the general murmur. I opened my communication channel. The military frequency was already chaos. Command, this is Sector 4. What is that sound? Please advise. All units, this is Sector 2. We are hearing voices outside the perimeter wall. Request. Command, Sector 7 reporting. The sound is coming from inside the buildings. Repeat, from inside the... I went to the library window and looked out. The streets were empty. Curfew was in effect. Not a single human was visible. But the sound continued. That low, pervasive, all-encompassing whisper. I learned later what they had done. It was brilliantly simple. In the days before the occupation, when they knew the fleet was coming, the humans of Haldwell had prepared. They had recorded messages, fragments of speech, readings from books, prayers, songs, and loaded them onto small, cheap audio devices powered by tiny batteries. Hundreds of them, thousands. They had hidden them everywhere, in walls, in drainage grates, under floor tiles, in the hollow spaces of public sculptures, taped to the undersides of bridges. Each device was set to a timer, and on the 23rd night, they all activated. The whispers said different things. Some were passages from human literature, some were fragments of personal letters. Some were names, just names, read slowly, one after another. The names of the people of Haldwell. Some of the devices were near our barracks. Some were inside our perimeter. Some, impossibly, seemed to be inside our own buildings, hidden during construction or maintenance we hadn't monitored closely enough. The effect on our soldiers was catastrophic. The communications logs from that night make for harrowing reading. I've heard them. Soldiers screaming about ghosts. Soldiers firing their weapons into empty walls. Soldiers breaking down, weeping, begging to be evacuated. 2 soldiers in Sector 5 opened fire on the building they were quartered in, demolishing an entire wall trying to find the source of the whispering. They found a device the size of a human thumb. Commander Vorath restored order by dawn, but the damage was done. Not physical damage. We lost no one that night to enemy action. The damage was psychological. The fabric of trust and confidence that holds a military unit together had been torn, and in the gaps, something cold had taken root. Fear. Not fear of the humans, fear of the city itself. I heard Dravan say it in the mess hall the next morning, his voice flat and hollowed out. The city is alive, he said. The buildings are alive. They're watching us through the windows and whispering through the walls, and they know exactly where we are, every second of every day. No one told him he was wrong, because by then, we all felt it. Vorath's response was comprehensive and ruthless. He ordered every building within the occupation zone systematically searched for hidden devices. He imposed a 24-hour curfew. No human was permitted outside for any reason. Food and water would be distributed by Tesserand patrols. He also ordered something else, something that still visits me in the dark spaces before sleep. He ordered the destruction of all non-essential cultural materials in the city. Their culture is their weapon, he told the command staff. Their songs carry messages, their books carry ideas, their art carries meaning we can't decode. We strip it all. Bare walls, empty shelves, silent streets. We reduce this city to raw infrastructure and we cut them off from everything they use to coordinate. He looked at me, starting with the library. I stood in the archive room and looked at the shelves I had spent 3 weeks cataloging. 12,416 books. I knew the exact number because I had counted every one. Novels, poetry, history, philosophy, science, children's stories, cookbooks, repair manuals, religious texts from a dozen human faith traditions, a handwritten journal from Haldwell's founding generation detailing the first years of the colony in script so careful and deliberate that you could feel the writer's determination to preserve something fragile. Vorath had given me until morning to remove any items of intelligence value. Everything else would be burned. I stood there in the silence, and I thought about Maren, about the way she touched the spines of the books as she walked past them, her fingertips trailing along the shelved volumes like a pianist remembering a melody. About the way she had described each one. This one is about a girl who finds a door to another world. This one is about a boy who befriends a dragon. This one is about a woman who walks across a desert to find her brother. Stories, the currency of human civilization, the mechanism by which they transmitted not just information but identity, empathy, moral reasoning, hope. Everything that made them what they were, and I was supposed to help destroy it. I started packing. Not for intelligence, for preservation. I worked through the night, selecting volumes not strategically, not by any rational criterion, but by instinct, by love, by the desperate need to save something. I wrapped them in thermal sheets from my kit and sealed them in waterproof containers and hid them in the library's basement, behind a wall panel I discovered was loose. I saved 312 books, less than 3%. When dawn came and the burning detail arrived, I stood outside and watched them carry the rest into the street and set them alight. The smoke rose in a column that was visible from every part of the city, and the humans watched. From their windows, from behind their curtains, they watched their words burn. And for the first time since the occupation began, I heard sound from them. Not screaming, not protest. A low, sustained hum. A note held collectively, resonating from thousands of throats. It filled the streets and vibrated in the glass of the windows and settled into the stone of the buildings. A sound of grief so profound and so controlled that it was more terrifying than any scream. They were mourning, and in their mourning they were telling us something. You have made a mistake you do not yet understand. The disappearances stopped after the burning. For 3 days, nothing happened. No soldiers went missing. No whispers in the night. No anomalies of any kind. The city was silent in a way it hadn't been before, a deeper silence, heavier, as though the air itself had thickened. Commander Vorath took this as vindication. We've disrupted their network, he told us. Destroying the cultural infrastructure has severed their communication channels. Maintain pressure. We'll have this city pacified within the week. He was wrong. The silence wasn't surrender. It was the pause before something changed. On the 28th day, the humans began leaving. Not fleeing, not in panic or desperation, leaving. Calmly, systematically, household by household. They packed what they could carry. They locked their doors. They walked to the city's edge and disappeared into the forest. Our patrols tried to stop them. They simply walked around the patrols. When soldiers formed cordons, the humans waited patiently until the soldiers had to move for shift changes, for supply runs, for the basic necessities of maintaining a perimeter, and then walked through the gaps. They did not resist, they did not fight, they did not run, they walked. And they walked in patterns that divided our forces. A group moving toward the north gate drew patrols from the eastern sector. A family approaching the western checkpoint pulled resources from the southern perimeter. It was choreographed, a vast, slow-motion ballet of movement that kept our forces constantly repositioning, constantly reacting, never able to concentrate. Within 48 hours, the population of Haldwell had dropped from approximately 30,000 to less than 5,000. The remaining humans were the elderly, the infirm, the very young, those who couldn't make the walk, and a few others who stayed for reasons I didn't understand until later. Vorath was furious. "They're building a force in the forest," he said. "This is a tactical withdrawal. They're consolidating for a counterattack." He ordered reconnaissance flights over the forest. The drones found nothing. Dense canopy, difficult terrain, no heat signatures, no electromagnetic emissions. Either the humans weren't there, or they had found ways to hide that our sensors couldn't penetrate. Both possibilities were equally disturbing. "We hold the city," Vorath decided. "Let them sit in the forest. They have no shelter, no supplies, no infrastructure. They'll come back when they're hungry and we'll be here." He underestimated them. Again. Because the humans didn't need the city. They had built the city, yes. They had filled it with their lives and their culture and their history. But at their core, beneath the layers of civilization, humans are something much older than city builders. They are hunters. And we had just volunteered to be the thing standing in the place where all the traps were set. The first trap was the water. Haldwell's water supply came from a reservoir in the hills above the city, fed by mountain runoff and distributed through a network of pipes. We had secured the reservoir on day one. We had guards on it, sensors in it, regular testing. On the 30th day, the water turned bitter. Not poisoned, our tests confirmed that immediately. And I want to be clear about this because it matters. The humans did not poison us. They could have. They had access to the reservoir's feeder streams, and they could have introduced any number of lethal contaminants. They chose not to. Instead, they introduced something that made the water taste terrible. A plant extract, completely harmless but intensely bitter. Undrinkable, not because it would kill you, but because your body would refuse to swallow it. It was a message. We can reach your water. We chose not to kill you. This time. Vorath ordered water purification from our emergency supplies. We had enough for approximately 10 days. The second trap was the power. Haldwell ran on a combination of solar collection and a small fusion plant on the city's eastern edge. We had secured the fusion plant. We had not secured the solar grid because it was distributed panels on rooftops across the city, feeding into a common network. On the 31st day, the solar grid failed. Not catastrophically, the panels simply stopped tracking the sun. Their orientation motors had been disabled. Remotely, it seemed, through access points in the network we hadn't known existed. We still had the fusion plant, but the fusion plant supplied baseline power. The solar grid had supplied the surplus. Without it, we had to ration. Lights dimmed. Heating systems went to minimum. Sensor arrays were reduced to essential coverage only. They were peeling away our capabilities one layer at a time, not attacking us, degrading us, the way water degrades stone slowly, patiently, with the absolute certainty that time is on its side. On the 32nd day, Maren came to the library for the last time. I had hidden inside the building after the burning, maintaining the fiction that I was cataloging surviving materials. In truth, I was listening, trying to understand the sounds of the city, which had changed. The bells had stopped. The singing had stopped. But there were other patterns. The creak of loose shutters, the drip of water from a broken pipe, the way the wind moved through the empty streets, channeled by the buildings into corridors of sound that rose and fell like breath. She came through the back entrance as always, but this time she was carrying a bag. "I'm leaving," she said. I set down the book I was holding. "Where?" "The forest. Everyone's going. My uncle came for me this morning." "Maren, I wanted to say goodbye, and I wanted to ask you something." She reached into her bag and pulled out a book. I recognized it immediately. It was one of the volumes from the children's section. The one with the blue cover she'd told me about on her first visit. A story about a girl who finds a door to another world. How? I asked. I thought they were all. I took it the day before the burning. I knew it was going to happen. I could tell from the way the soldiers looked at this building. She held it out to me. I want you to keep it. I can't. You're the only one here who would take care of it. You're the only one who understands what it is. I took the book. It was light, barely 200 grams of pressed fiber and pigment. It was the heaviest thing I have ever held. Maren, your father, he's in the forest, isn't he? He's part of... She shook her head. I don't know what my father's doing. That's the truth. I only know he told me to be kind to you because you were kind to our books. I stared at her. Your father knows about me? Keth. She used my first name. She had never done that before. Everyone knows about you, the alien who loves books, the alien who tried to save them. A cold wave moved through me. Not fear exactly. Something more complex. The realization that I had never been invisible. That my quiet acts of preservation in the dark of the library basement had been observed, catalogued, and transmitted through the same invisible network of human culture that I had been trying to understand. They're not going to hurt you, Maren said. I wanted you to know that. What about the others? She didn't answer. Maren? Goodbye, Keth. She turned and walked to the door. At the threshold, she paused and looked back. The book's about a girl who walks through a door into a world she doesn't understand, she said. She's afraid the whole time, but she keeps going because she figures out that understanding something is always worth being afraid. Then she was gone. On the 34th day, Patrol Unit 3 found the missing soldiers. All of them. They were in a clearing 2 kilometers north of the city, at the edge of the forest. 67 Tesserand soldiers and specialists who had vanished over the course of the occupation. They were sitting in a semicircle in the grass, and they were alive. Every single one of them. They were uninjured. They were fed. They were clothed in clean garments, human garments, simple but well made. Their military equipment had been removed, but they had been given blankets, water, food. They had been treated as guests. Patrol Unit 3 approached with weapons drawn, expecting a trap. The missing soldiers stood up and walked toward them with expressions that the patrol leader described in his report as haunted but calm. Renn was among them. I spoke with her that evening, after the medical team had cleared the returnees. What happened? I asked. She sat on her cot and stared at the wall for a long time. They took us quietly, she said. One at a time or in small groups, no violence, a hand over the mouth, something that smelled sweet, and then darkness. We'd wake up in a room underground, I think, clean, warm. There were humans there. They gave us food and water and blankets. They didn't speak to us for the first few days, just made sure we were comfortable. And then they started talking, not interrogating, talking. They asked us about our families, about Tessera, about what our world looked like, what we ate, what music we listened to. They told us about Haldwell, about the people who lived there, the teacher who had won a regional award for her student programs, the old man who carved wooden animals and gave them to children, the couple who ran the bakery that everyone agreed made the best bread on the planet. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like someone describing a dream they couldn't quite believe they'd had. They made us know them. Not as targets, not as an occupied population, as people. And then, once we knew them, they asked us one question. What question? Why are you here? She looked at me. Her eyes were wet. And I didn't have an answer, Keth. The Dominion sent us here to secure a colony for annexation. But why? What had these people done to us? What threat did they pose? They're farmers and librarians and bakers. They wanted to live in their valley and raise their children and read their books, and we burned their books. She put her face in her hands. They took our weapons and they fed us and they showed us who they were, and then they let us go. That's the worst part. They let us go. Because they knew that we'd come back broken. Not broken in our bodies, broken in our certainty. I sat with her for a long time after that. Neither of us spoke. Because she was right. The returned soldiers were technically unharmed, medically cleared, fit for duty.
But they would not fight. Every one of them. 67 soldiers who had been shown the faces of the people they were occupying and could not unsee them. Commander Vorath relieved them all of duty and confined them to quarters. But the damage rippled outward. The returning soldiers talked to the others, quietly, in the mess hall, in the corridors, during the long watches of the night. They described the humans they'd met. They shared the stories they'd been told. And slowly, the occupation force began to understand something that Vorath had been trying to prevent them from understanding. The people in the forest were not the enemy. We were the enemy. On the 35th day, a diplomatic shuttle arrived from orbit. Councilor Trevann, a senior member of the Galaxy Council's Annexation Committee, descended from the shuttle in full ceremonial dress, flanked by 4 guards and a personal secretary. He was tall for a Tesseran, with the deep blue crest of the political aristocracy, and he moved with the particular kind of confidence that comes from never having been in physical danger. Vorath met him at the landing zone. I was there because Vorath had ordered all senior staff to attend. I stood in the back, holding Maren's book inside my jacket like a secret. "Commander, your progress reports have been concerning," Trevann said. "The Council expected this colony to be fully pacified by now." "The situation has presented unexpected challenges, Councilor." "Challenges." Trevann looked at the city around us, the dimmed lights, the empty streets, the soldiers at the checkpoints, hollow-eyed and twitching at shadows. This was supposed to be a custodial operation, a colony of farmers. The humans are more resilient than initial assessments indicated. The humans are primitives who have been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. The Dominion has conquered 14 worlds. Explain to me, Commander, how a population of 30,000 unarmed colonists has stalled a full occupation detail for over a month. Vorath's crest was flat against his skull. Humiliation, rage, both contained behind the mask of military discipline. "Councilor, if you would review the operational logs." "I have reviewed them. Disappearing soldiers, whispering walls, singing children. It reads like a ghost story, Commander, and not a military report. The Council is beginning to wonder whether the problem is the humans or the quality of the forces assigned to deal with them." I watched Vorath absorb this, watched the last traces of caution leave his face. "What does the Council recommend?" he asked. "Results. The Council recommends results. This colony is a strategic waypoint. The annexation timeline is non-negotiable. If the current approach is insufficient, escalate. The Council authorizes expanded rules of engagement." Expanded rules of engagement. The euphemism landed in the morning air and sat there like a stone. Vorath saluted. Dravan returned to his shuttle. The shuttle returned to orbit. And Commander Vorath, who I believe was once a decent officer, began planning the thing that would cost him everything. I confronted him that evening. It was insubordinate. It was foolish. An archivist has no standing to challenge a military commander. But I had read too many human books, and those books had done something to me. They had infected me with the human disease, the irrational conviction that one person's voice matters, even when all evidence suggests it doesn't. "Commander, what are you planning?" We were in his office. He was studying maps of the forest topographical data overlaid with projected movement corridors. "I'm planning to complete our mission, Archivist. The expanded rules of engagement. What does that mean specifically?" "It means we stop treating this as a law enforcement action and start treating it as a military campaign. The forest is a hostile zone. Anyone in it is a combatant. There are children in that forest, elderly, families. There are insurgents in that forest who have abducted 67 of my soldiers. The civilians chose to join them. That choice has consequences. The soldiers were returned unharmed. They were treated with... They were psychologically weaponized and sent back to destroy unit cohesion. Don't be naive." "Commander." I stepped closer. "I've read their history. All of it. Every occupation, every resistance, every asymmetric conflict their species has ever fought. Do you know how they end? Enlighten me." The occupier escalates. The resistance adapts. The occupier escalates further. The resistance absorbs it and adapts again, and again, and again, because humans don't experience escalation the way we do. For us, escalation is a strategic tool. You apply pressure until the opponent calculates that resistance is irrational.
But humans don't calculate like that. For humans, escalation is fuel. Every act of force you commit gives them a reason to endure one more day. Every atrocity you contemplate will be remembered for generations, and it will justify everything they do in response. What would you have me do? Surrender to farmers? I would have you listen to the 67 soldiers who were in their custody. They didn't experience an enemy. They experienced a civilization, a people, a community that chose mercy when it could have chosen violence. They could have killed every one of our soldiers they captured. They didn't. That's not weakness. That's a message. A message that says what? That they don't want a war. They want us to leave. And they are telling us as clearly as they can without firing a shot, that if we turn this into a war, we will not like what they become. Vorath stared at me. You've gone native, Archivist. The human books have rotted your judgment. You're relieved of advisory duties. Return to your quarters. I left. In the corridor, I passed Lieutenant Maren, the intelligence officer. She caught my arm. I heard, she whispered. I agree with you. So does Kasuk, and most of the junior officers. It doesn't matter. He has the Council's authorization. Then we need someone else to hear you. She looked at me with an expression I recognized from the human histories, the look of someone deciding to commit treason. The humans left communication in the forest, dead drops, physical messages in sealed containers at marked locations. We found 3 of them on patrol routes. The contents were in human standard written requests for negotiation, addressed to whoever's in charge. Vorath destroyed them? Vorath never saw them. I intercepted them. Maren? There's an address in the messages, a meeting point, a time. They want to talk. They've wanted to talk since the beginning. She pressed a folded paper into my hand. Someone has to go. I left at 300 on the 36th day. The library had a basement access point that connected to the storm drainage system, the same system our patrols had swept and found empty. Maren had shown me the entrance once, casually, in the way she showed me everything, as though she were simply sharing interesting features of the building and not providing an escape route to an occupying alien. I am slow for a Tesseran, and the drainage tunnels were not designed for my physiology. I crawled through 2 kilometers of wet darkness, guided by the map Maren had drawn, until I reached an outlet at the city's northern edge. From there, I followed a ravine into the trees. The forest of Avery's Landing was dense in a way that Tesseran forests are not. Our world is arid, our vegetation is sparse and widely spaced. This was a wall of green, layered and interlocking, canopy above canopy, every surface colonized by life. I could barely see the sky. I walked for an hour, following the landmarks in Maren's notes. A lightning-struck tree, a boulder split in half, a stream crossing marked by a cairn of stacked stones. At the meeting point, a clearing beside the stream, I found a fallen log and sat down and waited. They didn't arrive. They were already there. I didn't see them until one of them moved. A figure detached from the shadow of a tree trunk 10 meters away, and then another and another. They had been present the entire time I'd been sitting, watching me, evaluating me. Humans, 4 of them. 3 wore the rough clothing of forest living, layers of natural fiber, muted colors, practical and worn. The 4th wore something else, a jacket that had once been formal, now stained and patched, but still recognizable as the kind of garment a person of authority might wear. This was Maren's father. I knew it before he spoke because his face had the same quality of grave attentiveness, the same serious eyes. "You're the Archivist," he said. "Keth Sovan. I know your name. My daughter told me about you." He sat down on a rock across from me. The other 3 humans remained standing, positioned at the clearing's edges. Not threatening, vigilant. "My name is David Hale. Before the invasion, I was Haldwell's municipal administrator. Now I suppose I'm whatever a person becomes when their city is occupied and their books are burned. I tried to save them. I know. Maren told me that too. 312 volumes hidden in the basement behind the loose panel in the north wall." I blinked. "How did she—" "She watched you do it. She was in the building that night, in the ventilation system above the basement. She saw everything. Of course she had. Of course. Mr. Hale, Commander Vorath has been authorized to escalate. Expanded rules of engagement. He's planning to move into the forest. We know. If he does, people will die. Your people. Yes. You don't seem surprised. David Hale looked at me with an expression that was patient and sad and very, very old. Older than his face. Older than his years. An expression inherited from 100 generations of humans who had faced this exact moment before. Archivist Trevann, do you know why we returned your soldiers? To destabilize our force. Psychological warfare. No. That was a consequence, not the purpose. We returned them because we don't want to kill anyone. We have been trying, with every tool we have, to end this without bloodshed. The silence, the disappearances, the whispers, the water, all of it. Everything we've done was designed to make your people decide, on their own, that this occupation isn't worth the cost. We wanted you to choose to leave. He leaned forward. But we need you to understand something, and I need you to communicate it clearly, because this is the part that matters. If your commander enters this forest with hostile intent, we will not run. We will not hide. We will not play games anymore. What will you do? We will fight, and we will not stop fighting. Not when it costs us, not when it hurts. Not when we're exhausted or outnumbered or afraid. We will fight until your soldiers are gone or we are dead, and if we are dead, the humans on the next world will fight, and the next, because that is what we are. His voice hadn't risen. His expression hadn't changed. He spoke with the flat certainty of someone describing a physical law. We are not a species that surrenders. We are a species that adapts. You can burn our books and we'll memorize the stories. You can destroy our cities and we'll live in caves. You can break our tools and we'll fight with rocks. You have conquered 14 worlds, and every one of those conquests succeeded because the species you conquered eventually decided that survival was more important than resistance. That calculation is rational, it is sane, it is reasonable. He paused. Humans are not reasonable. Not about this, not about freedom. We will spend our last breath on it, every one of us. The grandmother and the child and the baker and the librarian and the man who carves wooden animals. You have never fought anything like us. And I am telling you this not as a threat, but as a warning, because my daughter says you are someone who listens. I sat in the dark forest and listened to the stream and felt the weight of everything he was saying settle into me like sediment. What do you want? I asked. I want you to leave. I want you to take your soldiers and go back to your ships and go home. I want my daughter to grow up in her city and read her books and never learn what I know about what humans are capable of when they're desperate. I want this to end before it becomes something that can't be undone. I'm an archivist. I have no authority. You have something better. You have a conscience, and I think you have allies. He stood. There's a human saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You can't undo the invasion. You can't unburn the books, but you can decide what happens next. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a data chip, Tesserand manufactured, probably taken from one of the captured soldiers. This contains a complete record of everything that's happened in Haldwell since the invasion, documented by our people, testimonies, evidence, the truth of what your Dominion has done here. If your government has anyone who cares about truth, give it to them. I took the chip. And if they don't care? David Hale smiled. It was a gentle smile, and a terrible one. Then we'll make sure the rest of the galaxy sees it. Humans are very good at telling stories. You know that better than most. He turned and walked into the forest. The other humans followed. Within seconds they were invisible, swallowed by the green darkness as though they had never been there. I sat alone in the clearing for a long time. Then I began the walk back. I returned to the city at dawn to find it already unraveling. The returned soldiers, the 67, had refused Vorath's confinement order. They had left their quarters during the night and gathered in the central square, and they had been joined by others. By the time I emerged from the drainage tunnel, nearly 200 Tesserand soldiers were standing in the open, unarmed, their weapons left in their bunks. Vorath was on the steps of the administrative building with his personal guard. and the look on his face was the look of a man watching the foundations of everything he knows crack apart. "Return to your posts," he ordered. No one moved. Renn stood at the front of the group. Her voice carried across the square. "Commander, we are requesting formal cessation of offensive operations and immediate negotiation with the human population. We have collectively filed a conscience objection under Dominion Military Code, Section 14, Subsection 9. The right of enlisted personnel to refuse orders that constitute crimes against a civilian population. There are no crimes here. We are executing a lawful annexation authorized by the Galaxy Council. The destruction of cultural heritage materials is a crime under the Brevan Accords. The confinement of civilian populations without individual judicial review is a crime under the same. The planned military operation against a forest containing non-combatant refugees, including children, constitutes—" "Enough!" Vorath's crest was fully raised. Dominance display, aggression, the ancient biological signal that said I am in command and you will submit. You have all been psychologically compromised by enemy action. You are not competent to invoke the conscience objection. I am ordering medical confinement for every one of you effective immediately." He turned to his personal guard. "Enforce it." The guards looked at the 200 soldiers in the square. They looked at each other. They did not move. "Sir," one of them said quietly, "most of us have spoken with the returnees. We've heard what they experienced. We've seen what this occupation has become. With respect, we think they're right." Vorath stood alone on the steps. "I have thought about this moment many times, about what it must have felt like for him, a career officer, a commander who had led 14 successful operations, watching his entire force simply stop. Not in rebellion, not in anger, in conscience. The humans had done this, not with weapons, not with violence, not with tactical brilliance, though their tactics were brilliant. They had done it with something far more dangerous. They had told us who they were, and in doing so they had forced us to confront who we were. I walked through the crowd and climbed the steps to stand beside Vorath. "Commander." He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the square, on the soldiers who had been his, on the collapse of everything he'd built. "Commander, it's over. The Council isn't here. They sent you to hold a city and you've held it. But there's nothing left to hold. The humans are gone. The city is empty. The water is bitter and the power is failing and your soldiers won't fight. You can stand on these steps and give orders to no one, or you can end this with whatever dignity is left. They'll court-martial me. Maybe. Or maybe you'll be the commander who recognized an unwinnable situation and preserved his people. That's in the history books too." He was silent for a long time. The morning light moved across the empty streets of Haldwell, illuminating buildings that had been homes, that had been workshops and schools and bakeries, that were now just hollow structures occupied by frightened aliens a long way from home. "Contact the human leadership," he said. His voice was barely audible. "Request terms." David Hale came to the city that afternoon. He walked through the main gate with 2 companions, unarmed, unhurried, as though he were returning from a long trip and not entering an armed military encampment. The soldiers at the gate watched him pass and did not raise their weapons. We met in the administrative building, Vorath, Maren, Kasuk, myself, and 4 other officers on our side. David, his 2 companions, an older woman named Dr. Chen, who introduced herself as the colony's chief physician, and a young man named Torres who had been the militia's second-in-command on theirs. Torres was the one who surprised me. He was quiet, compact, with the careful movements of someone trained for violence who has chosen with great effort not to use it. He had been responsible for the operational planning of the resistance, the disappearances, the whisper devices, the water contamination, the systematic disassembly of our infrastructure. He had orchestrated all of it. He was 26 years old. "Here are our terms," David said. "They are non-negotiable." He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. 1. Tesseron forces withdraw from Haldwell and all territory on Avery's Landing within 72 hours. 2. All Tesseran military equipment is removed. Nothing is left behind. 3. The Dominion of Tessera formally acknowledges that the annexation of Avery's Landing was a violation of the colony's sovereignty and agrees to reparations for damages, the amount to be determined by independent arbitration. 4. The data chip provided to Archivist Trevann, containing documentary evidence of the occupation, will be transmitted to the Galactic Press Network for public distribution. Vorath looked at the paper. The Council will never agree to reparations or public disclosure. The Council will agree to whatever avoids the alternative. Which is? Torres spoke for the first time. His voice was calm and precise. Commander, that we have spent 36 days demonstrating what we can do without weapons. We captured 67 of your soldiers without firing a shot. We disabled your water supply without poisoning it. We dismantled your power grid remotely. We psychologically fractured your entire force using hidden speakers and children's songs. He paused to let that settle. We did all of this while choosing, deliberately and continuously, not to kill anyone. I want you to sit with that for a moment. Everything we did to you was the gentle version. The version where we were trying to get you to leave without anyone dying. He placed his hands flat on the table. If the Council refuses these terms and sends more forces, we will not be gentle again. And neither will the other human colonies. There are 47 human worlds in this region of the galaxy. We talk to each other. We've been talking since your fleet entered the system. Every colony knows what happened here. Every colony is preparing. He leaned forward. Not preparing to defend, preparing to hunt. Because that's the thing about humans that your intelligence assessments keep getting wrong. We don't think about war the way you do. You think about war as a thing that happens between militaries, between governments, between defined combatants in defined spaces. We think about war as something that every single one of us carries inside. Every farmer, every teacher, every librarian, every 12-year-old girl who smuggles a book out of a burning building. David Hale raised a hand, and Torres fell silent. What my colleague is saying, David continued, is that you've seen what Haldwell can do. One city, 30,000 people. Imagine 47 worlds. Imagine billions. That's not a war you can win. It's not a war anyone can win. The only rational response is not to fight it. Vorath read the terms again. He set the paper down. I'll transmit to Fleet Command. The decision isn't mine. We understand. You have 72 hours. David stood. Doctor. Chen and Torres stood with him. At the door, David paused and looked at me. Archivist, my daughter wanted me to tell you something. Yes? She says you should read the book she gave you, all the way to the end. She says the ending is important. Fleet Command accepted the terms in 39 hours. I learned later that the decision was not born of wisdom or compassion. It was born of mathematics. The analysts at Tessari Prime ran the projections, the cost of pacifying a single human colony, multiplied by 47, factored against the Dominion's total military capacity, and the numbers were devastating. They also ran a secondary analysis, one that troubled them far more. They modeled what would happen if the humans, instead of defending their colonies, went on the offensive. If they took the skills they demonstrated at Haldwell, the patience, the creativity, the psychological sophistication, the absolute refusal to stop, and pointed them outward. The models produced results that the senior analysts described as civilizationally threatening. In the end, it wasn't morality that saved Avery's landing. It was arithmetic. But I choose to believe that the arithmetic was downstream of something else. That somewhere in the chain of decisions, someone read the testimonies on that data chip, the words of ordinary humans describing what had been done to their city and their lives, and felt something. The same thing I felt when Maren handed me a book and told me to take care of it. Recognition. The recognition that these were people, not a resource and not an obstacle, not a custodial challenge. People. The evacuation was orderly. Vorath, to his credit, conducted it with professionalism. Equipment was loaded. Personnel were shuttled to orbit. The buildings we had occupied were cleaned. This was my suggestion. And to my surprise, Vorath agreed. We left them as close to the condition we'd found them as we could. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something. I was among the last to leave. I had spent the final hours in the library basement, retrieving the 312 books I had hidden. I carried them out in sealed containers and stacked them carefully in the main reading room, on the shelves where they belonged. When I emerged, the humans were already returning. I could see them on the roads leading into the city, streams of people walking home, families with children on their shoulders, elderly men and women supported by younger relatives, dogs running ahead, barking with joy. And I saw Maren. She was on the road from the north, walking between two adults I assumed were her uncle and another relative. She saw me across the distance and raised her hand. Not a wave, not a gesture of triumph or forgiveness or farewell. She simply raised her hand, palm open, and held it there. I raised mine in return. Then I walked to the shuttle and left her world. This is my testimony. This is what I witnessed. I am telling you this from my hospital bed on Tessari Prime because the Galaxy Council is convening a special session to discuss the human question, and the proposals on the table fill me with a dread more profound than anything I experienced in Haldwell. There are those who argue for containment, surround human space with military assets, block their expansion, starve them of resources until they're too weak to resist. There are those who argue for a preemptive strike, a full-scale military assault on all human worlds simultaneously, overwhelming force applied before they can prepare. There are those, a few, not enough, who argue for diplomacy, for recognition, for the simple rational acknowledgement that the humans are a civilization, not a problem. To the containment faction I say, you were not in Haldwell. You did not see what 30,000 humans did with nothing but songs and silence and patience. You cannot contain a species that communicates through the position of flower pots on windowsills. They will adapt. They will endure. And when the containment fails, and it will fail, they will emerge more determined than before. To the military faction I say, you did not listen to David Hale. You did not hear a man describe with quiet certainty the absolute willingness of his entire species to fight to the last breath for the right to exist on their own terms. You have not read their history. I have. I have read about Stalingrad and Thermopylae, and the Warsaw Uprising and the Long March, and 1,000 other moments when humans chose death over submission. You cannot kill enough of them. The mathematics have been done. You cannot kill enough. To the diplomats, the few who are listening, I say, hurry. The window is closing. The humans are patient, but they are not infinitely patient. And every day the Council spends debating containment and preemption is a day the humans spend preparing for the possibility that we will choose violence. And they are very, very good at preparing. I keep David Hale's data chip in my quarters. I keep it next to Maren's book, the one with the blue cover, about the girl who walks through a door into a world she doesn't understand. I read it in the hospital, the way Maren told me to, all the way to the end. The ending is this. The girl returns home. She walks back through the door into her own world, and she closes it behind her. Not because the other world was dangerous, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned what she needed to learn, and it was time to go home and live differently. That is what I am asking the Council to do, to walk back through the door, to come home, to live differently. Not because the humans are dangerous, though they are. Not because we cannot defeat them, though we cannot. Because we should not want to. Because in 41 days in a city of books, a 12-year-old girl showed me what civilization actually means. It means choosing every day to be something better than what your fear is telling you to be. It means preserving words when the fire is coming. It means feeding your captors and sending them home. It means raising your hand across a distance and holding it there, open, waiting to see if the other side will do the same. I carry 3 things from Haldwell. The first is the data chip. I have transmitted its contents to every news network, every diplomatic channel, every public forum I can access. The Intelligence Bureau has tried to suppress it. They will fail. The truth has a quality that humans understand better than anyone. It persists. The second is the book. The blue cover is creased now, the pages softened by handling. I have read it 11 times. Each time I find something new in it, a passage that resonates differently, a metaphor that unfolds into new meaning. This is what the humans do with their stories. They build them with layers so that the same words can teach you different things depending on who you are when you read them. The third thing I carry is invisible. It is a wound, and it is a gift, and I do not think there is a word for it in the Tesseran language. In the human language, there are many words for it, because humans have been carrying it for millennia. They call it conscience. They call it empathy. They call it the thing that breaks you open and makes you larger than you were. Maren, if you ever hear this and knowing your species, you will find a way. Know that the books are safe. All 312 of them, plus the one you gave me. They survived the occupation. They survived the burning. They will survive whatever comes next. Because I will protect them the way you protect your stories, with everything I have. Transcript ends. Archivist Keth Sovan's testimony was entered into the official record of the Galaxy Council Special Session on Human Relations. The Council voted 7-4 to reject military action. The Diplomatic Recognition Accord was signed 9 months later. Haldwell's library was rebuilt the following year. The new building has a wing dedicated to interspecies literary exchange. Above the entrance, carved in stone in both human script and Tesseran notation, is a line from a children's book about a girl who walks through a door. Understanding is always worth being afraid. Maren Hale serves as its head librarian. She keeps a shelf of Tesseran poetry by the window, and on certain evenings, when the light in the valley turns gold, she reads from it aloud to anyone who will listen.